must do today, because tomorrow may be too late. Thank you. This is a very special Yom HaShoah for me. As I said, we have launched something new today. We are dedicating the flag, and I want to present this memorial flag, international memorial flag to the Holocaust, to Eitan Tzur, the president of the Shalom community. And this would be the first step where this flag will be hoisted, not only all over the state of Florida, but all over the United States, every time, not just on Holocaust Memorial Day. Every time deniers will come and say this never happened, or those who say, well, let's see if it can happen again, we'll hoist the flag and say, we will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Raanan. Our next speaker is Reverend United Church of Christ.
It wasn't so long ago that my congregation was worshiping at Temple Shalom. And when the time came, with our building complete, just a mile down the road, we did what Temple Shalom had done. They had a Kadima, had a pilgrimage from a place where they had been worshiping to their building. And so we did the same thing. And it's a friendship that has continued, and it's an honor to be here today. For many of us, holidays are just a day off, though they may have started out as holy days. That's what a holiday is, literally, a holy day. And generally, we celebrate holidays. For Christians, it's Christmas and Easter. For Jewish people, it includes Hanukkah and Purim. But some holidays are observed rather than celebrated, like Ash Wednesday and Yom Kippur. And some holy days are not official holidays, but they are observed just the same. An observance is like a memorial, a time for remembering, a time for telling stories. We tell such stories to help us remember three things: where we came from, who we are, what we have learned to help us proceed into the future. September 11th is a vivid example of what this means for us all, certainly for all the generations of Americans living now. Perhaps that is a contemporary entry point for any of us to begin to understand what the Holocaust means for the Jewish people. The Holocaust, described as the war against the Jews during World War II, began on November 9, 1938, a day that lives in infamy as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when synagogues and Jewish businesses were vandalized throughout Germany and Austria. Thousands of Jewish people were arrested and forced into concentration camps. But the Holocaust, also called HaShoah, or the burnt sacrifice, is generally commemorated on this day, when the Jewish uprising began in the Warsaw Ghetto. It is that generally follows Easter, and whether by intention or not, this is significant. For it ultimately reminds those of us who are Christian to acknowledge our history of complicity in the scandal of anti-Semitism, while recognizing that the Jewish community of Israel rose again, like our Jesus of Nazareth. We Christians need to understand and see those of you who are Jewish as the living relatives of the one we hold most dear to us, that you are sacred to us for that reason, among many other reasons. For the Jewish people, the world has learned that the Creator of the universe has a name. The history of that relationship between the Eternal One and humankind has been remembered and preserved through the Bible stories of the Jewish people, and through your traditions of song and ritual. And even food helps to tell the story at Passover during the Seder meal. It is not clear to me whether Passover is a celebration or an observance, because there are elements of both. It is a celebration of the freedom of the Hebrew people from Egyptian slavery, yet an observance, too, of the devastation of the 10 plagues that hurt the Egyptian people. Dayenu is part of a song and part of the story that's told at the Seder meal. That means it would have been enough. And this is said after the naming of each plague, as if to say it would have been enough if Pharaoh had relented and just let the Hebrew people go. No need for retribution, no need for further violence. Empathy for the Egyptians is built into the story of Passover, even love for the enemy. But don't stop there. It's not enough. Putting ourselves in someone else's shoes through storytelling allows us to see where others are coming from and who they are. Those of you who are of the Jewish community have a sacred responsibility to continue to tell your unique story for the sake of all humankind. Those of you who lived through the Holocaust, or who know those who did, have an obligation to keep the story alive so that it never happens again. But don't stop there. It's not enough. There are lands with other people who have suffered or are suffering from exclusion and violence just because of who they are. Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, these are names that are like scars. In Tibet, there is a slow-motion genocide going on against the indigenous people there. But you don't have to go overseas to find exclusion and violence against people just because of who they are. But you don't stop there. So keep your story alive and tell it until ethnic hatred and distrust stops. Never to happen again anywhere. Anyone. Would that be enough? Shalom, salam, peace.
I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Reverend Ed Waters from St. Timothy's Catholic Church.
I am so deeply honored to be here. My colleagues before me, members of the various religious communities, fellow villagers, it is an honor for me to be here. I have a large parish here in the village, and right now we are working very hard to bring in even more members so I get a bonus if anybody wants to be baptized. On Easter Sunday, at about 11:30 in the evening, I got a call that my beloved aunt had passed away. And so I made arrangements to fly north to Michigan to have and celebrate her funeral mass. On Easter Monday, she would have been 97 years old. And in the course of doing the celebration, and we had a reception. My mother was the youngest of 8 children who spanned it over 17 years. So a lot of my older cousins are very old and they sit around telling these wonderful stories. And I happened to mention at the reception that I was giving a talk at this Holocaust Remembrance. And one of my cousins said, "We need to tell the story of your uncle's cousin." And I said, "I've never heard the story. Who is my uncle's cousin?" "Your uncle's cousin is Vivian Fry." And I don't know if you know the story of him, but he is now being called the American Schindler. He was a 32-year-old Harvard graduate, educated in the classics, and became an editor in New York City. And he helped save thousands of endangered refugees who were caught in the Vichy French zone, escaped from Nazi terror during World War II. He died in obscurity. He died without recognition in this life, and having been reprimanded by our United States government for his actions. Despite having had no training in underground work and no knowledge of forgers, black marketers, or secret passages, within 24 hours after his arrival in France, he committed himself to a mission that saved prominent persons such as artist Marc Chagall and Max Ernst, writer Hannah Arendt, and sculptor Jacques Lachix. Fry said, "I stayed because the refugees needed me, but it took courage, and courage is quality that I haven't previously been sure I possess." This man who found the courage to save some of Europe's most talented artists, writers, and thinkers remained unrecognized by countrymen and unacknowledged by his country until recently. In 1991, 50 years after his courageous actions in France saved thousands of innocent lives, and 24 years after his death, Fry received his first official recognition from a United States agency, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council. In 1996, Ariel Sharon was named as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Heroes and Martyrs Remembrance Authority in Jerusalem, and was the first American recipient of Israel's highest honor for rescuer during the Holocaust, an honor also received by Oskar Schindler and Raoul Wallenberg. This hero worked famously throughout France and forced others into his legion. He sought those who could continue to help the cause, those who would bring the Nazi regime down by terrorist acts, if you will. And when Fry returned to New York, he recounted his story and tried to warn of Hitler's impending massacre of the Jews. His activities in France prompted the Federal Bureau of Investigation to open a file on him and to keep him under surveillance and prevented him from ever working within the United States government. Shortly before his death, Mr. Fry was awarded